And good afternoon, and I am so excited about talking to Berit Gorden, who's going to be the keynote at the Right to Learn conference, and that's a conference that's near and dear to my heart, and it's face to face this year. Uh, so I want to do a couple of quick share screens here. First, she is the author of these two books, and No More Fake Reading and The Joyful Teacher. And she'll have a chance to talk about that during the interview. And she, as I said, is going to be the keynote at Right to Learn. And let's make that nice and big. Right to Learn is going to be face to face in Columbia, Missouri, centrally located, easy to find, May March 3rd and 4th. And Stony Creek Inn, which is a new location for us. We're making it a smaller venue on purpose. It's our first attempt to come back as we've been doing virtual for a couple of years now. It's our first attempt to come back as a face-to-face. So we've chosen a smaller venue. Talk much to facilitate that. So I'm going to stop the share now, and I have been doing all the talking, and now it's time for Berit to do some talking. So tell us a little bit about your personal and professional background.
I was in the classroom for many years as a language arts and English teacher. And I think I ran up against a lot of problems that many teachers are encountering. And as a kid who grew up in a really isolated area in Vermont where you couldn't see another house from my house, and I was very lucky to grow up in a house of readers, I read a lot. We also had a TV that had 3 channels, so there wasn't a lot to do. So I read a ton. And when I became an English teacher, I just assumed naively that my students would want to read and have a reading habit established. And that isn't what happened. I had the equivalent of, cell phone in the book, and kids are really good at avoiding what they don't feel good at and what they don't want to do. So I encountered that as a teacher, and I also had, and my book is No More Fake Reading is really thinking about that problem of students who are reluctant to read because they don't feel good at it. They don't have a reading identity established. They're not in the habit of reading. And it's a little bit of what I did in my own classroom and also what I've gleaned from other amazing teachers I now work with. So that's a little bit of my own childhood as a reader and then a teacher of readers. And now I'm out of the classroom and I get to work with teachers, which I love. I loved working with students. I also love working with teachers. They are my favorite people. My husband's a teacher. I'm in a family of teachers. So I just feel lucky to get to talk to teachers at this conference as well.
Okay, and it's a wonderful conference, I promise you, and a lot of amazing teachers there. So that's a good segue. You've talked a little bit about your two books. Before I move on to what you're going to talk about as a keynote, is there anything more you want to say about the books?
Yeah, and not necessarily. My husband keeps saying I really should plug books because we have 2 kids in college, and I should not be so shy about encouraging people to buy the books. But what I do want teachers to know is not necessarily needing to go buy these copies of books, but the one thing, and I will be talking about it when I come for the keynote about the joyful teacher, is that I'm worried about teachers right now. I was worried about them pre-pandemic. I know in my own teaching life, I found teaching tremendously hard. And it's not a profession in which I know many people who feel like they end their teaching day and they say, yeah, I knocked that out of the park, pat themselves in the back. No, I know so many teachers are working tremendously hard and they're not really sure if they're having an impact. And that's not a great place to be. And it's leading to a ton of burnout. And so The Joyful Teacher is a book I really wish I had had when I used to, I used to cry during my 6th period prep, and I knew what time I kind of needed to stop whimpering so that my eyes weren't puffy when I went back to seventh period. But it's for all the teachers who feel really overwhelmed and they're not having, let alone the joy of teaching, they're not feeling even a sense of I've got this. And so the Joyful Teacher is organized in a series of teaching goals. Every chapter is a different teaching goal. And the idea is that teachers, first of all, should have the autonomy to choose a professional goal that's right for them, but also that the goals are based on a progression of goals. And this is where I see so many teachers sort of, again, not necessarily feeling, let alone joyful or rested, but even that satisfaction of having done a job well. They're not sure. And so the progression of teaching goals is really designed for teachers to choose a goal that's right for them, but also to think about becoming that high impact expert teacher as a progression. And that if we don't have a foundation in certain teaching goals, it's really hard to get good at other aspects of teaching. And so the very first goal in the Joyful Teacher is how to stay happy and healthy in a really demanding job. Because if we don't have that in place, we don't stay in teaching long enough to get good at all of the other things. And we don't have that ability when our students walk into the classroom to say, hey, I'm so glad you're here, and mean it, because we're too depleted. And so I think that's probably quite a bit of what I am going to talk about actually at my keynote, is how to help teachers prioritize what matters most, because we can't get good at everything all at once. And in an era where more and more and more is being asked of teachers, I want teachers to do for themselves what they know works for kids. And what we know works for kids is meeting them where they're at, not using a deficit model and saying, here are all the things you're not doing. We know that doesn't work for kids. They would shut down. But for some reason, we expect teachers to be able to sustain themselves in a profession with that. So I want teachers to be able to meet themselves where they are at and choose one goal along a progression based on what they do have in place. So for instance, if they have routines in place and students know where to go and what to do at different parts of the class, and you feel like you have routines that really cultivate an empathetic and respectful group of students, and people use time well, then that's part of management. Then you might want to work on relationships, right? And if relationships are really solid between you and students, and also among students, then you might want to work on shifting that balance so students are working just as hard as you are. But again, I'm thinking about goals along a progression, because I think so often teachers are asked to become very good at things when maybe they don't have the foundation in place. As an example, when I was teaching at a big public school and I saw probably 140 students across the week, one of the goals for the school that year was that kids needed to be in groups all the time. It's group work, collaboration, which I believe in. I love it in theory, but I was a new, inexperienced teacher. I didn't have foundations in place. So I tried my hardest to have kids work in groups and collaborate. And I fell flat on my face. Didn't matter how many books I read or mentor teachers I observed. And it was because I didn't have foundational goals in place of routines of what it looks like to work in a group and invite someone else in. I didn't have relationships well established among my students. So they didn't really trust one another. I hadn't spent enough time on that independence where students could work well on their own, even if I wasn't sort of, sitting over their shoulder. So again, I felt like I was an unsuccessful teacher, but a lot of it was because I hadn't thought about becoming a high impact teacher along a progression of goals. And so I'm going to be talking to teachers about making sure they are treating themselves with the same compassion and kindness that they treat students with. And that compassion means that they are meeting students where they're at, forming a goal to help them get better based on what students know. And I want teachers to do the same thing for themselves, and to celebrate progress too, the same way that we do as students, that we are marking and celebrating our progress toward being a high impact teacher, because I don't think there's enough of that either.
Okay, well, that's just amazing. Now, my friends tell me I'm flunking retirement. I still push in and I still work with a few teachers, and I promise you, they're getting an email this afternoon saying, please watch this and let's talk about this next week. And the other thing was I was having flashbacks to my training in writing workshop and reading workshop, that one of the things you do early on in workshop before you ever start workshop is, what does it look like when we're conferencing? What does it look like? And have the kids tell you, and that kind of thing. So it's kind of like, oh my gosh, yes, 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 and yes. So any last thoughts here before we wrap things up? Anything more you want to say?
Well, I think one of the things that I notice the most now when I get to work with these incredibly hardworking teachers, and what I think is really the most important profession out there, the thing that I'm seeing so often is that teachers are working tremendously hard. And I really hope that that the strategies I offer can help them think again about shifting that balance, because kids become better readers and writers by doing those things a lot. And we want them working out those reading and writing muscles. And also that is part of what lets us tuck in, like you said, a conference. It's what lets us tuck in feedback, is when we've shifted that balance a little bit. So I look forward to meeting the teachers. I look forward to sharing some strategies and learning from them. But again, I really hope teachers are kind to themselves, not just in a self-care way. I think that term is being way overused right now because I think staying in the profession and feeling good at it, we need self-care, but we need a lot more than just self-care. But we need teachers to stop looking at what they haven't done or getting stuck in that, and really marking out what they have in place, and then thinking about how to incrementally, again, be that teacher who doesn't just feel good at teaching, but is good at teaching.
Okay, well, I'll tell you, I'm so looking forward to this. And for my colleagues out there that have been to Write to Learn before, you know this is the kind of a conference where you take away things on Friday that you'll be able to just use right in the classroom on Monday. And I'm just sensing we're going to get things like that. So I'm going to do one last share screen here and remind everyone that the conference is on the 3rd and 4th in Stony Creek in Columbia, Missouri, nice and centrally located. There'll be links to the books. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to recommend to the teachers I'm working with, get both of them. We'll see if we can talk a principal into that. And now it's time for the famous ending, which is the Bomarito Zoom wave goodbye. So let's wave goodbye. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you so much.
And thank you, Berit. We're so looking forward to seeing you at Write to Learn.
I can't wait. I can't wait. See you soon, Sam. Take care.
Bye-bye.